What's going on, guys? It's Mike for SimRacing604 back once again with another video done in partnership with my friends at Race Department. In this video, I'm going to be sharing 5 shortcuts to help new or inexperienced sim racers get faster on the track right away. Let's get into it. So we'll start this video off by talking about your sim racing gear. Sim racing is known as an expensive hobby, and most of us will eventually come to own at least a simple wheel and pedal set, something like a Logitech G29 or a Thrustmaster T300. But then, of course, envy and curiosity take over and we end up upgrading. So we buy some new pedals and then maybe a new wheelbase, and then of course you need something to hold all of that new gear, so it's on to a cockpit, and so on and so on. So our gear becomes something transient and dynamic, but in truth it might be better to stick with what you've already got if your goal is to become faster. The stories of that guy who runs 2 seconds faster than you in quali, running a G27 screwed to a desk in the corner of his cramped apartment, are well known in sim racing. But why is he faster? Well, the G27 is an old wheel, so he's probably owned this wheel for a long time and likely put in thousands of hours on it and uses it as expertly as a musician might use a Stradivarius violin. And there's a key lesson here. If your goal is primarily to get faster on track, prioritize using your current gear expertly rather than chasing upgrades. So the next time you boot up your favorite sim, spend a few minutes getting your force feedback settings dialed in. Same as field of view. I've left links in the description for videos that can help you get your field of view and your force feedback dialed in quickly. And as someone who's been chasing upgrades for years, I can tell you that the times when I'm fastest are always just before an upgrade, when I've put in lots of time with my current gear and I have it dialed in to my liking. I personally chase immersion over speed, so I'm willing to drop down a bit in pace in the name of a fun new piece of gear, but again, if speed is your goal, make the most of what you already have. This isn't to say that upgrades should never happen, but be mindful that a better way to get faster is to make the most of your current gear rather than chasing newer or better gear. Get your pedals properly calibrated, your force feedback set up to your liking, and your field of view dialed in, and you should be set up for success. I have to thank a friend of my channel for the second tip. He's a quiet guy, so I won't include his name, but he's an alien level driver who I've been chatting with offline for a while, and recently I was bouncing driving theory off him and he offered me 2 simple but extremely effective tips that I now keep in mind while driving. So this is the first of those tips. So how do you straighten a corner? Well, we've all seen those green and red diagrams in video thumbnails tagged with things like "you're losing time here," and they're all alluding really to the same thing. Starting the corner wide, hitting the apex, and finishing the corner wide on exit is how you straighten a corner, or at least make it straighter. Following this general strategy minimizes the amount of steering input required to complete the corner, and less steering input means higher speed. This is a pretty easy thing to prove to yourself. Approach a corner you know well and experiment with starting or finishing a corner with a lot of steering input. In other words, keep straight until the last possible second and then cut in hard, or hit the apex with almost no steering input and then cut sharply on corner exit. Compare that with a nice wide approach and track out arc, and the latter will be faster every time. This tip and the next are also both mental anchors or things to bear in mind while driving. There are definitely exceptions to this rule, like just about every other rule in life, so best to treat this as a heuristic rather than a hard and fast rule. It's true that sometimes a faster line is away from the apex, and often you're not able to approach a corner perfectly because of the previous corner, or exit a corner very wide because of an upcoming corner, but as a general rule, you'll want to focus on a cornering flow of outside to inside to outside. So this is definitely something to keep in mind while you drive, and something to carefully observe when you watch a truly fast hot lapper. They use all of the track and push their car almost impossibly wide on corner approach and exit. So add this mental tip to your mindset when you're driving right now, and you should start to see results right away. The second tip for your mindset while driving is also the second tip I got from my alien friend. To some of you this is going to be obvious, but for someone like myself it's another good mental trick to keep in mind when you're driving. And like straightening a corner, this is something you can observe in truly fast sim racers. Aliens can get onto the power much quicker than a driver like me, and they can push their braking zone almost impossibly deep into the corner approach. These factors mean they can be on the power a lot longer than a common driver like myself, and the results are obviously faster. Unlike your line through a corner, staying on the power longer is going to require some trial and error, and you're probably going to spin your car a few times while learning to get on the power quicker, but this is sim racing, so the mistakes cost you nothing. Experiment with getting on the power a few meters earlier each lap, or braking a few meters later. You should see your lap times fall, and you'll know you're at the limit when you can no longer slow the car enough to make it around the corner, or when you get on the power too early and lose traction. Keep in mind that a bit of traction loss is to be expected, and you'll become more comfortable with pushing your car past its limit over time. For now, try and mitigate the wheel spin. The best thing about these tips for mindset is that you can adopt them right away and see the results immediately. That extra distance on the power should translate to faster lap times right away. If it doesn't, it probably means you're driving too aggressively and either locking the brakes or overdriving on track out and losing time to not having enough traction on the drive wheels. I've done a few polls over my years as a YouTuber, and when I ask people how they rate their setup abilities from 1 to 10, with 10 being the expert, the average response is usually below 5. So I'd love to tell you that your car setup does not matter, but unfortunately it does. The good news about setups is that a bit of fundamental knowledge goes a long way. You can make significant improvements to your lap times with even some high-level setup tweaking, or you can always find a setup to download and copy. If you have an hour or two to spare, you'd be helped immensely by watching Chris Hayes' excellent setup series, which I've linked in the description. Some quick setup tweaking can instantly net you a few seconds of improvement on lap time. Setting up a car can be very complicated, but there are 3 key takeaways that I'll mention here. First, when it comes to fuel, only carry as much as you need. Less fuel means less weight, and less weight leads to better acceleration, braking, and cornering. This is the easiest and most basic setup tweak. In most modern race cars, 10 to 20 liters should get you through qualifying. For a race though, note how many liters you use per lap during qualifying or practice, and multiply that figure by an estimate of how many laps you'll put in during the race, and just add 10% to be safe. Next is tires, and tires can be a very detailed and confusing science to get right, but understanding fundamentally that you'll need to keep your tires from getting too hot or too cold is a good thing to know. Most racing sims have some sort of real-time tire temperature graphic that can be enabled to make sure your tires are staying healthy. Keep them in the green and you'll be able to turn laps faster than if they were too hot or too cold. Again, I refer you to Chris Hayes' excellent video series to learn more about tires, but the easiest way to tweak and experiment with tire temperature is to increase or decrease the pressure. Less pressure typically heats up tires if they're running too cold, and more pressure typically cools them down if they're getting too hot. Allow yourself a few laps before making a judgment on whether your tires are running too hot or too cold. Lastly, knowing a bit about aerodynamics can help. Not all cars, but many GT and open wheel cars allow you to make some level of change to the wings, which affects how air flows over the car while in motion. An increased wing angle means more downforce, and a decreased wing angle means less downforce. Put another way, steeper wing means faster corners, and a shallower wing allows for faster straight line speed. The ideal wing angle depends on the track. A track with long flat-out sections like Monza will benefit from less wing angle since your car will be able to hit higher speeds on the straights, and like your tire temps, you'll need to experiment a bit with your wing angle. See what a higher or lower wing angle does for your lap times. So I'll close out this video with a chat about fun. To get good at anything in life, ultimately you need to practice at it. And because this video is about shortcuts, I'll note that improving your lap times via practice will happen a lot faster if you're having a good time. Whatever keeps you interested in sim racing, be it F1 cars, GT3 cars, classic road cars, or anything else that brings you happiness, focus your time on that. Slogging through laps in a car that you hate is only going to lengthen the learning curve, and the same goes for tracks, of course. This is actually more like the third mental shortcut on this list, since we're tying in the motivation to improve with this tip. And if you're motivated to succeed and improve in a given car and track, success will happen much faster. That's not to say, of course, that you have to stick with one car and one track forever in order to improve, but being at least somewhat focused in on what you drive, especially if it's something you're passionate about and motivated to master, things will happen quicker. So that's it, guys. 5 tips that you can start to implement right away, and you should see some results very quickly. Thanks so much for watching, and we will see you next time.